Hi, Greg Glenn here. Today we're going to post a few videos that were done as webinars for Napco. This is a 3-video series. They are a bit long, but cover quite a bit of information on in-building coverage. The first one that you'll be seeing here is the ecosystem, how we got to where we're at essentially, who is pulling the strings, who is making the decisions, and kind of what the FCC says about that, and why. Why you can't just put a signal booster in just any building. And it's not related to whether the building has coverage or not. There are many other factors that have to do with selecting a signal booster as a solution for poor coverage problems. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this. Please feel free to drop me an email. And if you have any questions, that's Greg at powerofpulse.com. And also look at our Tap Talks series. We'll be doing a series of videos called Tap Talks, and the second iteration of Tap Talks, which will have Chief Alan Perdue and Nate Hinkle from Sacramento Regional, will be posted on January 6th. So that will be a very interesting discussion topic. In fact, we've already generated many questions from the announcement of that video or that video series. And I hope to be answering some of these questions here. I'll probably start posting videos on that in the next day or so. Just getting lots of interaction on that and lots of great questions. Even as far as why are we doing this? Why are we creating this hellhole for ourselves when it comes to in-building coverage? Anyway, hope you enjoy it. And again, if you have any questions or responses, please feel free to either note them at the bottom of the video or even, again, email me at Greg, G-R-E-G, at powerofpulse.com. That's Greg at powerofpulse.com. Enjoy. My name is Greg Glenn. I'm with Pulse Signal Solutions. I am the CTO for the company. I am also the DAS doctor, as some of you have seen on YouTube. Today we're going to be talking specifically about in-building communication systems. And this is a program that is being sponsored by NAPCO, the Northern California Association of Public Safety Officials, along with Pulse. We have Nate Hinkle with Sacramento County Regional Communication Systems. We have Rob McCarthy, who'll be actually taking questions. I would encourage folks to type in your questions and get them as soon as possible. Our preference is going to be to answer them at the end of the discussion. That's we'd like to do that. But however, if it's something where you feel I've missed something or it's ununderstandable, get that question to Rob and he'll pop it in right away, and we can then deal with it as we move forward. I do want to say a couple of housekeeping things. This session is an executive session. I'm trying to keep all of any math that is granular out of it. There is a little bit of math. I can't get away from it, unfortunately, but we tried to make it easy for everybody to understand. Session 2, which will occur next Tuesday, will be a deep dive into the math. And session 3 is basically going to talk about how a licensee or HJ can develop the plan to be able to solve their in-building systems without creating a bunch of interference while staying within the FCC rules. And so that's my introduction. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. This is, hopefully we're going to get this to go. Rob, if something goes wrong, let me know. Hopefully everybody can hear my audio well. Okay, are you seeing, Rob, are you guys seeing the screen? Okay.
Yeah, excellent. We're good.
All right. So basically, this in building radio enhancement technologies with Pulse and Napco, sponsored by Napco. A little bit about Napco. Napco is one of the largest APCO-only chapters in the country. Napco represents all of the technician, analysts, telecommunicators, engineers, dispatchers, fire personnel, officers, and managers, along with vendors and manufacturers that build communications networks for the public safety community. Their Southern California chapter was the, I believe, first chapter of APCO. I would encourage anybody who's on this webinar to seek your local chapter. I know that they're not super active in some markets, but APCO is the coordination body for all public safety licenses that get submitted to the FCC. And these people are the ones that represent pretty much all of the licensees when it comes to communications issues for public safety. And we thank them. I've got a little bit of an intro here. I'm going to try to keep this light, but this was given to me about 10 years ago by, maybe longer, about 15 years ago now, I guess, by one of my coworkers who basically came into my office and it basically said, "This explains you." So this is my life. And here we go.
I'm worried about little Dilbert. He's not like other kids.
What do you mean?
Yesterday, I left him alone for a minute, and he disassembled the TV, our clock, and the stereo.
That's perfectly normal. Kids take things apart.
Oh! The part that worries me is he used the components to build a ham radio set.
Oh dear.
Is that bad?
Normally I'd want to run an EEG on him, but the machine isn't working. It's worse than I feared.
What is it?
I'm afraid your son has the knack.
The knack?
The knack. It's a rare condition characterized by an extreme intuition about all things mechanical and electrical, and utter social ineptitude.
Can he lead a normal life?
No. He'll be an engineer.
No!
There.
So I hope my social ineptitude doesn't ring through too clearly in this presentation, but I am one of those techno geeks, and I promise you, I have tried to make this palatable for everybody, because I know it's a difficult subject. A little bit about Pulse Signal Solutions, what you can expect from us. I'm going to give my shameless plug. Got to keep the lights on. We're all about real clear connections. We treat our partners like friends. We just don't do what's asked. We use our expertise to solve the problem beyond what is at hand. We want our words and messages to be very clear, as the connections we provide. No jargon, not just because it adds complexity, but so that you always understand the value we bring. We want to make sure all connections can be made, plain and simple. Connections that improve our industry, connections that prepare people for whatever the future may hold, and connections for those that need them most, our public safety users and in-building users primarily. Pulse Signal Solutions is the RF Professional Engineering Division of Apex Site. Apex Site Solutions been around for over 10 years. We stand towers, we stand sites, we build large towers, big towers, small towers. We do everything from troubleshooting to installation to bringing systems up. We're the engineering side of the house. Our staff has over 50 years experience in public safety radio communications. We've been involved in designing in-building communication systems myself since the late 80s. I've been building them from scratch, before the word DAS, before the word signal booster, signal booster might have been around, but BDAs were not. We understand not only the fire code, but the FCC rules and the physics behind radio systems. Pulse designs and builds public safety communication systems by understanding the overall ecosystem, not just one aspect. And then Pulse not only designs and builds great systems, Pulse also participates in driving great policy. Myself, I sit on NFPA 1225, which is the governing board that writes the code standards for in-building and communications in general within the National Fire Protection Code, or the NFPA Fire Code. I also sit on the policy advisory panel for NICET, which is the National Institute for Certification. It's part of the National Institute of Professional Engineers, and is trying to develop certification for folks that are installing these systems. And you will see that certification standard moving forward. It is moving forward now, but you'll start to see it next year. I sit on UL 2524, Standards Technical Panel. This is a panel that got impaneled to deal with BDAs. And it is a bit controversial, but we can talk about that if you have questions. I am a member of, and our company is a member of Northern California Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. I've been a member for some 20 years. Also, I am a member of CPRA, which is the Southern California chapter and the original chapter of ABCO. I have been a member there for as many years. I have membership in both chapters as well as the national membership. And I also sit on the Safer Buildings Coalition Committee Chair for Public Safety Technologies. So we are trying to move good policy forward. Okay, so why are we here today? Specifically, we're here today, and this is a picture of one of our local dispatch centers, to protect these guys. And some of these people you may know. I mean, if you recognize who they are, give them a shout. But some of these people, they may be local guys, they may be in the industry. But we're trying to here to protect the police, the EMS, and the fire folks, and as well as any other first responders that have to use their two-way radios for communications purposes. This is going to be a three-session. This is basically in 3 sessions. Today, we're going to discuss the ecosystem and the physics of solving in-building communication problems. Session 2, we're going to take a dive into the math behind the science. In session 3, we're going to discuss licensee planning for these type of enhancement systems. A few myths I want to dispel right away. In-building coverage is an individual building problem. For several years, and well, actually about the last 5 years, specifically to 7 years, there's been a mentality that if a building doesn't have radio coverage, it's the building's problem. This is simply not true. It is a macro problem, or it is an infrastructure problem. Just like you don't install a building if you don't have sewer capacity, you don't let them tie into your sewer. If you don't have sewer capacity, you don't let a building radiate into your network unless you have it all planned. And that has been going on for a long, long time and causing a lot of problems. A signal booster in every building that has poor radio coverage will solve the in-building communications issue. That's absolutely a myth. It will not. Signal boosters only affect the buildings in which they are deployed. That is also a myth, and we're going to go into that today. Okay, so what problem are we trying to solve, basically, when we talk about in-building communication? Essentially, we're trying to bring in signal that's on the street or outside into a building. And we have very high power portable radios, and we're really just trying to make that portable radio look like he's outside, he or she is outside of the building. That's all we're trying to do, nothing more. Who's involved in this process? Well, we've got several people that have gotten their hands into it. We have the National Fire Code Standard, NFPA and IFC. They've written some code around it. You got local fire codes and building codes. The local fire codes and the building codes adopt from the national standards. Many times, people don't even really know what they're adopting when they adopt from the national standards, and this is one of those cases, but local fire codes are mostly predicated on either the NFPA or the IFC directly, and in many states they may be modified, or many jurisdictions they may be modified from the national code. We have the FCC, which is the overarching authority on all things RF emitting and anything that has to do with public safety communications. We have the licensee, who's typically the company and or entity that's operating the radio system. And then we have, last but not least, physics. And we're going to talk about physics today because if we don't get this under control, physics is going to win. I will just tell you straight up, physics will win this. It may be a political battle. Everybody thinks it's, it's all about, it is about doing the right thing, but all about getting these amplifiers in buildings. Physics does not allow this to happen, and we're going to talk about that. So if physics wins, it takes down our systems. Okay, the National Fire Code. And I'm not going to get specifically into the code today. I don't have a whole bunch of time. But the National Fire Code standards now include language regarding in-building radio coverage. IFC 510 and NFPA 1225, 1221 today, it will be 1225 next year. Cover these issues. Both the IFC and the NFPA call for the use of network enhancement equipment to be deployed if a building does not have adequate radio coverage. The National Fire Code, both national codes speak to the use of RF emitting devices. Both national code standards, if read in their entirety today, refer to the use of signal boosters or BDAs. California and International Fire Code, and I'm bringing this up because California is an IFC state, and they do have California Fire Code 510. This is the direct wording out of the code. Amplification systems allowed. Buildings and structures that cannot support the required level of radio coverage shall be equipped with a radiating cable system, a distributed antenna system with Federal Communications Commission certified signal boosters or other approved fire devices. As a result, these standards get adopted into local codes. And in most situations, the party responsible for the operation and the one that's legally responsible, the licensee, is not even aware they're being installed until these devices create a major problem to their network. So how do the fire officials typically enforce this, or building officials typically enforce this? You'll all get a signal booster. If you don't have radio coverage, the first thing is you put in a signal booster. And I will tell you, we are now seeing it come out in building specifications from general contractors, which we're going to discuss why this can't be done, but why it's illegal also. Okay, so this is clear and concise, right? Everybody gets a signal booster. Everything's going to work fine. Well, actually wrong. Physics and the FCC have something to say about this. And oh yeah, the licensee does too. Federal Communications Commission. The FCC is the authority of record when it comes to implementation of all RF emitting devices. This doesn't matter if it's a CB radio, your cell phone, LMR radio, doesn't matter. Everything is regulated by the FCC. This was established in the Communications Act of 1934. Even non-intentional emitters like computers and wall warts that you use for power supplies to charge your cell phone, all technically have to be certified under the FCC rules. All public safety communication systems, the LMR systems that we use to talk back and forth every day, fall under Part 90 of the FCC rules. Part 90 always calls out the licensee as a responsible party for doing anything with RF emitting devices deployed on their networks. Federal Communications Commission defines what a signal booster or BDA is. The reason I put this up is because, first of all, this term BDA has come across over the last few years. We call them BDAs, they are technically signal boosters, and the FCC defined some 20, 30 years ago what those are. The FCC defines who has the authority to operate a signal booster. The FCC defines the parties and who is responsible for the operation of the signal booster. And the use of a signal booster, and one other quick thing, the use of a signal booster or BDA is the only device that the FCC states must have express written consent from the licensee. This is very important to understand. There are reasons behind this, but a signal booster is probably the most, can cause the most detriment to your system of any other type of device that can be put on the system. However, the commission has given the licensee the authority to use these. Okay, so the authority to operate, this is copied straight out of 90.219. You can look this up on the internet. Just type in FCC 90.219. The authority to operate a PLMRS, this is private land mobile radio system licensees for stations operating on assigned channels higher than 150 meg. So that would be all of our stuff that fire is VHF, a lot of VHF, UHF, and 800 meg, may operate signal boosters. Now, notice that the licensee, not anybody else, the licensee may operate a signal booster limited to their service band for which they are authorized as needed anywhere within their service contour. One of the things that I'm seeing is that the way the fire code's written, there are actually BDAs that are being installed outside of the service contour because no coverage equals BDA. Okay, specifically in the rule, it may not extend the station service contour. Okay, so you have service and interference contours. And again, we're not going to go into the math or any of this stuff, but I'm just wanting to make sure that people understand that these are here. And these are the overarching and the rule. PLMRS licensees may also consent to the operation of a signal booster by a non-licensee, such as a building owner or a signal booster installation contractor or, somebody else. But that has to be within their contour, and it has to be across their applicable frequencies, and it must maintain a reasonable, and the licensee must maintain a reasonable level of control over these operations in order to resolve interference problems. Now, I want to bring something up here. The FCC talks about interference, and there's two types of interference. There's the interference a signal booster can cause to another licensee. In other words, if I'm in Sacramento and I put in a system in Sacramento and it interferes with Roseville, Roseville then can come back and say, we got a problem, guys. You got to fix your problem. There's also the other kind of interference where the actual BDA interferes with the licensee in general. This with their own licensee. Okay. If I am a licensee, I am allowed to interfere with myself. So if I'm calling the FCC and I'm Los Angeles Fire and I'm interfering with myself, and the FCC comes in and says, well, these are approved boosters you put in, you've got no standing, right? So the bottom line is that's why the licensee has to approve these, because if the licensee has standing when they approve it, but up until then, it is it's illegal to do this. So I just where's my hat? Thanks, guys. I just wanted to bring that up. Non-licensees seeking to operate a signal booster, which would be everybody but the licensee, right? This would be the building owner. This could be an integrator. This could be anybody that doesn't hold the license, that doesn't have the KNCI call sign related to them personally or to their organization, is the non-licensee. They have to get express consent of the licensee for which the devices in the system are intended to amplify. And this consent must be maintained in a recordable format. And now the FCC actually, and we're going to talk about this a little bit, has even clarified that even further. So that's the law. So who's the licensee? Well, a lot of people don't even know, well, who's the licensee? Because if you read the fire code, you would think that the fire code officials are the licensees. The HJ is the licensee. The HJ has authority. No, actually not. In most circumstances, the licensee is not the building code official and is not the HJ as defined in the fire code and standards. Therefore, those people that are making the decision about modifying the radio network don't have authority to do so. The licensee is the party that is responsible to the FCC to make sure that all federal laws are followed within the day-to-day operation of their system. They hold the license to operate the radio system. The FCC has stated that the licensee is the only party that can authorize the use and can deliver the express written consent to amplify or retransmit the frequency. This has been going on in the cellular industry forever. I don't know why it's been so hard for the public safety industry to understand. Okay, so who is the licensee? Well, today I got one here, and we're going to bring him on board. This gentleman's name is Nate Hinkle, and Nate is the licensee for Sacramento Regional. And I'm gonna stop my sharing here, and I'm going to see if we can give this to Nate to do this here. I may have an issue with this here. Nate, are you able to pick this up?
Nope. It says host disabled.
All right. This is where I had an issue before, I think. Okay, I'm going to make you the host. Okay, there you go. Give it a try, Nate.
All right, let's give it a shot here. Okay.
Are we not recording this?
Oh, shoot. Hold on a sec here. All the little details that you have to go through to share your computer audio and everything.
Right.
Okay. There we go. Okay, I think hopefully everybody can hear me and see the Sacramento County logo up on the screen here. My name is Nathaniel Hinkle, and I'm the Telecommunications System Supervisor for the County of Sacramento, California. I want to welcome you here today, and I want to take the opportunity to thank Napco and Pulse Signal Solutions for giving me this opportunity. And I think, you know, what Greg is touching on here today has affected our organization throughout the years here. I've been with the county now for over 10 years, and prior to that, I worked for a local organization that helped support the county, and I did a lot of work for them prior to that. So what we'll do is I'm going to start the presentation that I have for you with just some recorded audio of a situation that occurs every day on almost every public safety system throughout the country. And you know, the calls vary, of course, but you know, these are all 911 related, life-saving calls. Everything from life-saving efforts all the way down to your local government operations. And it really speaks to how critical communications is and how critical the radio system is. So let's listen to this.
Okay, why don't you hold your position and back out at this point. 111 dispatch, go ahead and divert Public Works to North Fork Road.
Divert Public Works to North Fork.
While you're on the phone with MACCOM, let them know there is a camper that is stranded inside Fish Bend, so we'll need an immediate response with a brush rig to clear the road in.
Okay, as you can hear, you know, these types of communications occur every day, and our first safety, you know, our first responders really depend on the radio system to work, and that's in building and outside of the building. When they push that push to talk button, they expect somebody on the other end to understand them. And so, you know, that's why this issue is so critical to me and to the people that I work with here in SRRCS. SRRCS stands for Sacramento Regional Radio Communication System. And to give you a brief history, you know, about our organization and where we are, you know, Sacramento County is centrally located in a portion of California in between the Sierra Mountain Range and the Pacific Coast. It is where the state capital of California resides, in the city of Sacramento. We're centrally located in the breadbasket of California, and our county encompasses 1,000 square miles of varied terrain. We live in one of the most agriculturally productive states in the union and have a wide variety of technology-based and governmental economies in this area. We serve a population of approximately 1.5 million people in the Sacramento County area, and that actually increases in the surrounding counties. We have El Dorado County, Yolo County, Placer County, San Joaquin County. And again, our radio system just doesn't end at the borders of Sacramento County. It extends out into other counties. And so we have all kinds of interoperable communications that occur on our system on a daily basis. And, you know, our first responders really count on this to work properly for them. So the original 800 analog system, 800 megahertz analog system that we had was a NIPS in the NIPSPAC band. It was a Motorola SmartNet simulcast system. And this was installed both for the city and the county of Sacramento starting in around 1995. The overall architecture consisted of two subsystems, the city subsystem, which was 24 radio channels, and the county subsystem, which was 25 radio channels. We were actually very lucky to get in on the early buy-in of the 800 megahertz frequencies. It's very rare for a system to be so channel rich, as I say, and you know, we've carried a lot of those channels forward as we've migrated through. So most of the upgrades to the older analog system took place after 2003. Our dispatch consoles were upgraded to Centricom Gold Elite in 2004. And our simulcast backbone was also upgraded at the same time. We actually got the new simulcast controllers for that day, the MTC 3600s, which were upgraded from the 7809 controllers at that time, which were like a push button type controller, very reliable with key access, you know, the cards. And I worked on many of those for many years, but you know, the MTC 3600s, this is the channel bank down here, or not the channel bank, I'm sorry, but the controller. And, you know, this actually ran our system for many, many years, relatively reliable. Now, I've spent many nights and weekends working on this, as have many of my technicians. So we're glad to be rid of it. But anyway, you know, this is one of the state-of-the-art technologies that we put in place many years ago. And it lasted for us for a number of years, over a decade. We upgraded our Siemens channel banks, and I know people are going, my gosh, I remember those, or many of you are. We were running Motorola Tensor channel banks, you know, replaced them. We upgraded our network management. You know, we came into the 21st century here, you know, with network management. And, you know, back in the old days, we couldn't even dial into the system to see an alarm. We would never get an email or any of that kind of stuff. But the overall upgrade from the SmartNet to SmartZone occurred between 2005 and 2006. And then in 2015, we started our migration to the 30-channel Motorola simulcast P25 system. The system was completed in 2019, and all of our subscribers were migrated to the new system second quarter of 2020. This was quite a transition for us from analog to digital. As many of our users out there, if they're here listening today, you know, it presented its own challenges. The transition between an analog system and a digital system was difficult for our users to get used to the sound of it. It sounds different, it sounds digital. And typically it took about a month to a month and a half before many of the complaints ended. You know, as we moved people over each agency at a time, we learned that training was needed to kind of familiarize them with what this was going to sound like. And, you know, overall the migration went well, you know, with some glitches, but any big project always has that. So our system is comprised now of, you know, 7,800 megahertz. We're a 30-channel phase 1 FDMA P25 simulcast cell. That's our main system. We have our Davis P25 8-channel system. It's a 2-site simulcast cell, which we just recently added. And we have 2 P25 ERRCS sites to provide filler coverage into certain areas of the county. I'll go through this with a little map that I'll show you in a minute here. We are solely supported through our subscriber fees and provide a public safety grade communication system to our first responders and many other agencies. And we currently have over 18,000 subscribers from the city, county, state, and federal agencies that encompass first responders down to some of the local school districts and water resources. And we'll go through kind of what my subscriber base looks like. We're pretty diverse. So this shows you basically in brief, you know, a little diagram of our current system. We have a microwave backbone, which we'll be upgrading in the next couple of years to a fully IP-based backbone. But our main P25 site has a 10-site 800 megahertz trunk simulcast. We have our Twitchell ARS site, 700 meg, 12 channels. Our Davis site, which was just recently added, that's our 2-site 800 megahertz simulcast for the University of California, Davis and the city of Davis. And we also have our Folsom ARS site, from the famous Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. That's the city of Folsom for you. We have a little 4-site ARS site that kind of covers a smaller area in the city. And this all reports back into our controllers at our prime site. And our prime site we refer to as Brighton Heights. We share this facility with Sacramento City PD, and it's worked out very well for the developing the architecture of the system. Some of our sites are connected through fiber. We have fiber connections. Some are connected just through an AT&T T1 as we continue to support our system. So what kind of who's our subscriber base? Why is Sacramento County so important? Our radio system so important to our users? And it isn't just that we have local government on this. We have Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We have the California Department of Corrections, our local sheriff's department, over almost 4,000 units on our system. City of Davis, Elk Grove PD, Sacramento International Airport, California Highway Patrol. The chippers are on here. So, we have a lot of different subscribers from a lot of different areas. Sacramento Regional Fire. We have the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, California State Parks, El Dorado Hills Fire Department, Yolo County. And this is just a very short list. One of the famous rappers from the 1980s, Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. So we have the United States Customs ICE service on our system. SMUD, our local power provider for us in Sacramento County. We provide communications for all critical agencies in this area. They don't have enough resources to have communication systems for them throughout the county. We enhance things by that. So, what's so critical about putting a BDA on our system? And, as a licensee, it's important to understand that each and every BDA that is installed has a direct effect on the macro simulcast radio system. And if you step back for a second, what that means is that when a BDA is installed in a building that doesn't have coverage, it will directly affect the way the main system works. It becomes a part of that system. And it is so critical that it's installed properly. We are running into, several issues, throughout the years, and I'll describe a couple of those to you. But, we're seeing approximately 3 BDAs a month installed in our area. That's 3 BDAs a month. You add that up over years, and we could have hundreds, maybe even several hundred BDAs out there. We have a partial list of what's available and what's been installed, but this is one of the things that I'll go on and describe to you first. And I care deeply about each and every one of the first responders and the functioning of our system in their daily assignments, both in building and on the street. I'm very concerned at the trend I see to put a BDA in every building that does not offer acceptable coverage for our public safety first responders. A BDA is not always the best choice in these situations. This often causes the macro radio system to degrade in many ways. And the reason I say that is that, there are system improvements that we can make on our end. We can add another ARS site, a smaller cell site, to help provide coverage in buildings. Or we can at least be a part of making those decisions. When you put BDAs that are across the street from each other or a quarter mile away, I think it's important, and I think it really is a critical thing that a licensee be involved in making those decisions. Today, that does not exist. And I know a lot of other licensees out there are facing this issue. It's been an eye-opening and enlightening situation being involved in some of the conversations and forums that I have recently with licensees such as myself, describing these BDA issues and what they've had to face, just to ensure that their first responders are using a safe radio system that'll provide the communications they need day in and day out. So the current fire code is not written with this requirement to include the licensee as the primary decision maker in these important and often critically affecting system issues. You know, we are not even notified when a new BDA is installed in our area and receive this information through third parties. And this doesn't happen all the time. This happens regularly. I mean, I find out from several different people that a BDA has been installed over in one location and another's been installed. And you know, there's no consistency. You know, we try and work directly with our fire marshals and the people that certify the BDAs, but it's not working well. And this has got to stop. This is very critical. And, you know, as a couple of examples, you know, as a licensee, you know, 3 years ago, we had a situation on our system. We have what Motorola calls a zone watch. And the zone watch on a trunk system is a display that shows on your computer what channels are active and what channels are disabled and the current state of your system just by looking at the screen. And you know, we noticed one afternoon that suddenly we were losing, 3 channels. It started migrating across our channels. It would go from channel 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. Suddenly we had 6 channels disabled. And I thought, wow, that's not good. I mean, there wasn't a problem with our equipment, but you know, the migration down through the 800 megahertz spectrum on our NISVAC spectrum, we knew pretty much instantly that we had a spurious BDA. And where was it located was our first thought. You know, how do we solve this issue? You know, is it affecting our users? And you know, we got the team together, we deployed into the field, we looked at which sites were really being affected the most, and it took us 2 weeks to track this down. And the reason it took us 2 weeks is this wasn't a constant issue on the BDAs. It would come and go. It happened for 15 minutes to an hour, maybe 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. But by the time you deploy your resources in the field and you start tracking this down and you triangulate on the position, suddenly it would go away. And then we'd have to start the next day or when it really came back up again. And sometimes that was middle of the night. And, you know, it was just after 2 weeks, we finally found this intermittent signal. It was located in a large business complex in a very small room on the 2nd floor labeled electrical. And of course, nobody in the building knew this existed because the maintenance personnel didn't have a clue. But we were able to track this down. We unplugged the unit, which had Nextel on it. It was a Nextel BDA that was left over from many, many years, probably 10 years old, and had gone spurious. But we unplugged the unit. Instantly, we saw the source of the problem go away. We were excited to find this. You know, when you put that much time and effort into something like this, it's so critical. It was a real joy to put that off the air. And then approximately 6 months ago, a little over 6 months ago, you know, our team noticed that once again, we had channels that were disabling themselves on the system, anywhere from 2 to 3 channels. It was intermittent. And some days it was on for a couple hours, some days it wasn't. A couple of days into noticing this, I received a phone call from the communications manager at a local state university. And he was asking me, he said, hey, are you guys doing anything with the radio system, you know, in our area that would affect anything? You know, we're really having a lot of poor coverage issues in our area. I said, no, the system hasn't been touched. We have been noticing some strange things with channels disabling. And he said, you know what, even our local conventional repeater that our PD uses is experiencing coverage issues and intermittency. And I thought, boy, that's a real problem. You know, they have a local repeater there. But that also gave us a clue as to where the source might be coming from. We knew it might be a few miles away from that. So, you know, we pulled out our equipment, started tracking it down. One of our technicians finally found it on ground level. You know, and again, you know, you can see this on our sites, but when you get to the ground level, you don't always see the signal right off the bat. So this might take several days of driving around the county just to see the signal, because sometimes these aren't terribly strong. You know, throughout the county, it might go 2 miles out and you finally hit it. I've got 1,000 square miles to cover. So one of our technicians found it on the ground. We pulled our team in, we went into Sacramento State, and lo and behold, a vendor had just recently commissioned a BDA on that site, and it was not properly optimized. We had basically several BDAs in that area that were interacting with one another. You know, when you install one BDA and it's literally 500 feet or a quarter mile away from another BDA, and then you got a third one in the mix, when a radio keys up, these can all interact. And especially if they're not, you know, especially if the vendor's not even aware that those BDAs exist. This is why it's so critical for the licensee to be involved in making these decisions about where these go. I literally have dozens more stories like this of BDAs and significant issues throughout the years. So if you look at Sacramento County as, you know, our system as a whole that includes BDAs, that changes the drawing here. So as BDAs are installed throughout the county, and depending on their location, they can affect different sites, they can affect different areas. And, you know, in my example here, you know, we have basically BDA 1, 2, and 3, but then we have BDA to the nth. And again, in our county, I know we have several hundred BDAs out there, and we probably only know about half of them. We're very fortunate that, you know, we don't have more problems, but we are seeing an almost exponential problem occurring here in the recent years, because as Sacramento grows, and it's a growing economy here, more buildings are going up, more people are moving in, and more BDAs keep getting installed. And again, that's not the best solution. So one example of you know, the audio on our system, since we're a P25 system, we're all digital, and you know, this is the way mouse pointer went. This is the way the communication should sound on our system.
B truck plate 2142 David Union, 2142 David Union, Steel only.
So that sounds very loud, clear, perfectly readable and understandable. There's no background noise in the digital environment. You know, that's both good and bad. You know, moving from the analog world, you're used to a little bit of scratching and popping, but that usually doesn't exist at all in you know, a P25 system. So if we go over here, let me find my mouse pointer. This is where a BDA causes a problem for our system, or any interference for that matter. Let me get that audio up for you here.
102 Dundee F Frank 3 F.
So it's just about unreadable. I mean, it literally, you know, what kind of information did that guy need, you know, in a public safety situation? You know, if they're calling for shoot or no shoot, you know, what would you rather hear? Do you want to hear something that's loud and clear?
B truck plate 2142 David Union, 2142 David Union, Steel only.
Or do you want to hear something like this?
102 Dundee F Frank 3 F.
So the point that I'm trying to drive home here is that as a licensee, I try to provide the best communication system that money can buy, basically for our first responders and for everybody on, from first responder down to local government. And I need the help of those officials, the FCC, and, you know, the firemen, the fire marshals. Everybody needs to get involved with putting the licensee in on these critical decisions. We cannot continue to install a BDA in every building that does not pass a signal coverage test. So I want to thank you at this time. This closes my presentation. Thank you again to Northern California APCO and Greg with Pulse Signal Solutions. I'm Nathaniel Hinkle, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Hey Nate, since we were just talking about the topic now,
Hey Nate, unshare your screen too, please.
A question just came in regarding the FCC registration on their website. In your opinion, do you believe that the FCC BDA registration site could be utilized as a tool by licensees to be able to mitigate some of the issues with other installed sites?
Yeah, and herein lies one of the problems. So Type A BDAs that are installed anywhere do not have to be licensed. So they don't even have to go through the FCC to license this. So a Type B BDA, which Greg will get into some more later on and probably the next session or so, those have to be legally licensed. So if the FCC required all BDAs to be licensed, that would help track these down. Again, Type A BDAs are not required to be licensed at all. And that's the type that seems to be the preferred type people install throughout our system locally.
Okay.
So Greg, you should have control.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to go back here, and we've got a bit more to go. Thanks, Nate. I do appreciate that. And I'm assuming everybody can see my screen now. Is that right?
Looks good.
All right. And I do appreciate you bringing the audio clips. I've got audio clips that come out of the analog world. You know, we do know what kind of problems these are causing to digital systems as well. Unfortunately, they become even tougher to find on digital systems. And the reality is that many BDAs are not being registered. But we're going to talk about that. The FCC did come out with some guidance, basically called $100,000 fines for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I think more importantly, and this is why I've built this 3-part, the licensee has to have a plan. If you do not have a plan as a licensee, don't do it. Just don't do it. You're going to end up killing your radio systems. But we're going to go and talk a little bit about the physics behind this. Okay. So what's the problem, right? Number one, licensees were never involved in the writing of the fire code or standards. I mean, this went into the fire code as an annex of NFPA 72, and everybody was happy with that, okay? Because the annex said, hey, if you've got a problem, you know, here's a solution. Here's an option. And it moved from, oh, by the way, here's an option to BDAs will be used, and never was a licensee brought into the process at all. In fact, it's not until this year, and literally, it's become a joke in NFPA because I have been hitting it so hard, and I've been involved with so many problems that, you know, the interference problems, dealing with the FCC, you know, on different things that, you know, I guess they probably just got tired of hearing me, but, you know, obey the law, guys, you know, and I get, well, one of the things I get is the rules aren't being followed. Well, who's not? I mean, the fire code puts the HJ in that position. They're not following the rules. I mean, if you want to say the rules aren't being followed, the rules aren't being followed by the fire code and the building officials, because the rules specifically state that you have to follow the FCC rules. The fire code doesn't trump the FCC. FCC trumps fire code here. So licensees were not involved in the writing of the fire code. For the most part, licensees were never even aware that these devices were being required under the code, much less being installed on their systems until they were seeing interference. Improperly designed and unauthorized in-building enhancement systems have caused interference problems, resulting in the licensee community spending countless of dollars and engineering resources to troubleshoot this stuff. And they don't get refunded for this. I mean, they pay me, they pay Motorola, they bring in somebody else. They gotta either that or they stand up their own people. And so basically what you have is you have one side of the house playing in somebody else's swimming pool, and then, you know, they got to clean it up the mess. So not a good thing. Currently, it's estimated that less than 10% of all BDA DAS installed have obtained the proper permission from the licensee. Based on information gathered from licensees that are monitoring DAS installs, okay, so there are a few of them out there, 75 to 90% of the systems have uplink noise crowns or noise figures that exceed the criteria in 90.219. And the reason I want to bring this up is because, and I don't like this, and I've spoken with the commission on this, or shall I say corresponded with the commission on this. It is the licensee's responsibility to make sure that all installations meet 90.219. It is not the equipment vendors. And while I don't like it, and I'm going to try to change it, the fact is we have equipment vendors out there that build equipment that they say, oh, my equipment's certified, therefore it's your problem, that don't meet the FCC requirements to run under 90.219. And it's not because the rule isn't in effect. Unfortunately, it's because the testing procedure is not in place. And I know that's a poor excuse for everybody involved, but the thought process was, and I think a lot of people thought when we rewrote the rules back in 2010, that the community would be responsible. And I'm going to be the first to say, I've been a licensee, I've been a manufacturer, and now I'm back in engineering. The community, the industry has been grossly irresponsible. And not just, equipment manufacturers, everybody. And so if people want to start pointing fingers, there's enough blame to go around for everybody. The rules haven't been followed. The manufacturers aren't building equipment that out of the box can meet the rules. And I'm going to just put it out here like this, that 99% of the time, if you guys are installing an attenuator in your donor line, the amplifier doesn't meet the specification. I'll just put it out there like that. And we're going to talk, again, that's going to be one of the ones we can talk about in the math. I'm in the math series. I'm not going to talk about it here because it gets too extensive, but I'm just going to let you know that buyer beware. Licensee, you have to at this point call out bad equipment or call out good equipment, however way you want to handle it. But you either got to say, we're not going to allow this to be on our system, and literally, or we're only going to allow these to be on our system. And I know Matt Tice at Washington, D.C., people are starting to talk about standing up their own labs. The bottom line is that equipment that's being used in 90.219 service don't meet the criteria of the rule out of the box. And unfortunately, a lot of the integrators that are out there putting these in don't know how to make them meet it. Okay.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, sir.
We have Mr. David Sakota coming in with a question. I know session 2 is going to be covering more of the math behind the science, but can you give a bit of a high-level overview of exactly what you mean when you're talking about uplink noise crown?
Yeah, I can. Why don't we do this? Because I don't have a slide handy in here, but I have the description. And I mean, if they want to see what one looks like, they want to talk about what it is, we're going to demonstrate it in the slide presentation here. And so you can kind of get the idea, and then we can talk about it maybe in question and answer afterwards. Is that acceptable?
I'd say it's a good way of going about it.
Okay. So basically, what's the problem, right? The problem became so bad that the FCC had to write a 7-page document on December 11th of last year regarding a 1-page rule. And the law is quite clear. You read it, pull it up, 90.219. The law is quite clear. However, it appears that over 90% of the installations have ignored the administrative part, which is number 1, registration of your BDA, if it's a Class B, and number 2, getting express written consent from your licensee. And over 80% of the installations today have ignored the technical requirements. And again, there's enough blame to go around here. Here's a few statistics. If a BDA is in operation within 4 miles of a donor site, and this is at 800 megs, the odds are good that your macro receive system is being affected in a negative fashion. The FCC rules have specific requirements on BDA DAS installation system noise levels, and these are rarely followed. The 800 meg systems installed within specification of the FCC rules, which I guarantee you 90% are not being installed within specifications, will protect your donor site at 1 mile. When we rewrote the rules back in 2000 and what was it? Well, we started in 2011. I think they got published in 2011. We said, okay, BDAs aren't going to be used within a mile of a site. So and actually I wanted to go for half-mile protection, but I got overruled and we got 1 mile protection. So basically, even if you follow the FCC noise crown rules as they stand in the book or stand online, it will protect your site at only 1 mile. So if you got a BDA within half a mile, you can still have something that currently meets all the specifications. And and that's even questionable. But the noise crown specifications that still affect your site at 1 mile out. Noise figure is another one, and that's where I have a real problem right now is we have BDAs, signal boosters that are coming out that do not meet the noise figure specification. We're going to talk a little bit about that, not the math, but what it means in our slides. Okay, so let's get back to it here. System design best practices. This was presented by Jack Daniel. Some of you know him, some of you don't. And I'm not referring to the guy that is on the bottle, but Jack and I used to go around the United States back in the 2000s in California doing presentations on the use of BDAs because we used a lot of, at the time, Berg TXRX was really the only real BDA manufacturer. In 2007, we were seeing problems already. Okay, always use a minimum gain level and lowest power levels necessary to maintain reliable coverage. That is totally being ignored. This came out of one of my presentations in 2008. This was presented to Alameda County. How do I cover my tail? It's important that public safety communication community keeps informed and up to date, which unfortunately they really haven't either. Okay, so now we know what the fire code standards call for. And I didn't, by the way, if people want to see the letter from the FCC, I didn't put it in here because of time, but it basically says, no, the fire code cannot compel you to put in a BDA. You have to get permission. And if you don't, it's a $100,000 fine. So, and that's the gist of it, but it's a 7-page document basically outlining the rule as it stands anyway. So let's look at the physics behind this and why it's imperative that all the rules that we've been making get followed. Okay, so what is a signal booster? Well, most people, it's a red box, right? It's the red box that hang on the wall. It's the be-all, end-all, solves every problem for communications. Okay, and we're going to talk about it from a physics standpoint right now. And I'm going to break it down to something we can all understand, and that's our hearing, right? The way we hear. We deal typically with 12 kilohertz channels. Our hearing is really a 20 to 20 hertz to 20,000, but most people actually have the hearing of about the same bandwidth that a communication system channel is. Of course, it's RF, and we're in the audio spectrum, but all the theory is the same. Okay, so it's simply an amplifier with a microphone and a speaker. Microphone, service antennas, speaker, donor antenna on the roof. This is probably the easiest way to understand it. It's a megaphone that is never turned off. So it's like having a little megaphone and you got the button pressed, right? You just got the button pressed on it all the time. A fly goes buzzing by, you hear it out the speaker, okay? That's what it is. So we have megaphones that are yelling at our sites on an uplink side. Okay. So the BDA or signal booster, a device that can increase the signal to certain power levels. In order to do this, the amplifier must have gain. This is one of the terms. We're talking about some of the terms you're going to hear. You're going to hear the term gain. Okay. One of the things I argue with is low gain. We don't need a lot of gain because we got big radios. It's not like we're using cell phones that are 0 dBm. We got portables that are using 3 and 4, 5 watts of power. We don't need a lot of gain to overcome the problem. But because a lot of these amplifiers come in and they're cellular knockoffs, they get painted red, they get called public safety, and that's happened primarily over probably the last 5 to 7 years. That's the biggest problem. In our megaphone example, we have our amplifier that can produce 1 watt of power. So let's say that our little megaphone's a 1 watt megaphone. And when a person talks into the backside of that megaphone at 1/10 of a watt, or I'm sorry, 1/100th of a watt, they can drive that megaphone to full power. So we got a lady and she's speaking into the megaphone. She's nice and loud, and she has a nice loud signal at full power that comes out of her megaphone. Pretty simple. Now we have another lady here who's kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to speak loud into my phone, which is not what we have, believe me, in public safety. All of our phones or all of our radios are very loud. They speak very loud. And I'm not talking, and I just want you to understand this is about hearing. This is not about the language, right? I mean, some people speak French, some people speak English, some people speak Russian. That's the modulation format. What I'm talking about is just being able to hear. If you have a low voice going into your amplifier, you have a lower voice coming out of your amplifier or your megaphone. This is, pretty simple concept. Okay, so what can we do about that, right? When we have the lady with the low voice, she can speak it softly, and the lady with the high voice, well, we turn up the volume controller, we turn up the gain, right? So power output's still the same, but we turn up the gain so we can take the smallest signal possible and amplify it. Well, we can do that to a point. At some point, we turn up the gain so loud that it starts howling, right? The noise coming out of the big speaker comes back into the microphone and it howls. Or we can just add background noise to it. If some of you, if you're audio buffs, you might have turned your stereo up real loud with no input and you hear a background hiss. Well, that's God's noise or Big Bang noise being amplified. We're going to do a little bit, a couple other things. FCC allows us for a signal booster in Part 90 operation in public safety communications. On a railroad train, they can go a little bit higher, but on a public safety, 5 watts per channel. And at this time, the FCC has no limit on the amount of gain an amplifier can operate. However, there are noise requirements in place that effectively cap the amount of gain a signal booster can employ, although these are not being followed. And we can go into that in the math, okay? So let's talk about dB for a minute. Okay, dB is a term that you're going to hear used, right? My amp has 90 dB of gain. Too much. We don't need it. 65 is plenty, but these are, this is what we got to deal with. So my amp has X amount of gain. Okay, when we talk about gain, we talk about, well, hold on just a minute. Let's define some terms. I may have, okay. So the power level is in dB or dBm. Gain is the amplification factor, and that's in dB. So let's talk a little bit about this. When we talk about dB, right, my amplifier has 90 dB of gain. What we're talking about a ratio of 2 quantities, right? It's a multiplier effect. I can take a signal and I can multiply it X amount of times and make it bigger, right? Pretty simple stuff. The math is not simple, but the theory is. So when we say we have a certain amount of gain, that means we're multiplying by a certain amount, right? Okay, so dB is much like saying 2 times or 10 times or 100 times. That's something we understand because we work with it in math every day, but the decibel is a little bit different because it uses a logarithmic function. So when we use the dB, we can have a gain of 30 dB, which is 1,000 times. So if we raise a 3-watt portable 30 dB, the resultant value is 3,000 watts. Okay, the dB can also be used in the opposite direction. So we can have negative gain or a loss of 30 dB, which is 1/1000th. If we reduce a 3-watt portable by 30 dB, the resultant value is 3 times 0.001 or 3/1000ths of a watt. Okay, so it's logarithmic function. 0 dB, again, it is a relationship, right? 0 dB means I multiply by nothing. 10 dB, I multiply by 10. 90 dB, I multiply by 1 billion. So the idea of using dB is it gives us the option of representing very large changes with a relatively small number. So I can represent a change of 1 billion by using the term 90. 90 dB is equal to 1 billion. 1 billion or 1 billionth, depending on which way I'm using it, negative or positive, of the starting whatever it is. So if somebody says to you, I'm going to take 1 dB out of your paycheck, you're probably not going to want them to do that because that equates to about 22%. Or if they say, we're going to give you a 10 dB raise, if you reference it to $1, that means you get a raise of 10 times. That's a good amount of money there. Okay, so in engineering terms, we use typically a dB to modify a reference, okay? And in our world that we deal with, we're either going to reference a watt or we're going to reference a milliwatt, okay? So we're going to say that when we say plus 30 dBm, for instance, that means we're raising a milliwatt by 30 dB, and that equals 1 watt. Or when we go 60 dBm, that means we're raising a milliwatt by 60 dB, which essentially means we're multiplying by 6 zeros, whatever that is, a million times, something of that nature. So again, I don't want to go any farther into the math than that because it's a different way of thinking. But when we talk about dB, it's a ratio. When we talk about dBm, it's a ratio in reference to something. And what we deal with is wattage or milliwatts. Okay. So then we got Mom here. And, you know, if some of you are old like me, you might remember what movie that's from. We'll see if we do have anybody. So to heck, you say, what about noise? Okay, well, we talked about noise. We had Nate talk about noise a little bit. Let's talk about the theoretical noise floor. Again, I don't want to get too deep into the math here. We are going to do this next week, but it needs to be understood what we're dealing with, okay? So the theoretical noise floor, these terms are used interchangeably. KTB, theoretical noise floor, theoretical thermal noise floor. You might hear it called that. Some people call it God's noise. Some people call it Big Bang noise. Simply what it is when an electron moves through a resistor or anything, any device, it makes noise. And that's why some people call it God's noise, right? I mean, or Big Bang noise. It's Mother Nature. Mother Nature makes her noise. There's no free lunch. Mother Nature makes noise. And when we start talking BDAs, we're actually amplifying Mother Nature's noise to beyond the capacity of people to, when you think about amplifying something 1 billion times or 10 billion times, that's what we're doing with these amplifiers. Okay, so for what we do in our business, right, the thermal noise floor is related to KTB, which is a constant, the temperature, and the bandwidth of a channel. So for what we do in our business, we always assume that temperature is room temperature. Here on Earth, we calculate everything to room temperature. 290 degrees Kelvin, which is actually a little bit lower than room temperature. I think it's 59 degrees, something like that. But for the most part, on Earth, we do room temperature, and the difference between room temperature and, say, 130 degrees Fahrenheit, it doesn't significantly change the equation. So we can do all of our calculations at room temperature. So if somebody is stating KTB based on anything other than 290 degrees Kelvin, they're always talking about a hyper cold situation where they're doing something in super, super, super cold, and that keeps noise down, or they're doing something up in space close to the sun, and that increases noise. But when we talk about it on Earth, it's just at room temperature. Okay. One of the things that we talk about, and if you have questions, put them in here. KTB has to be referenced to a bandwidth to have any meaning. We have 174 dBm per hertz, 130 dBm for 25 kilohertz, 134 for 10, and 104 for 10 megahertz. All of those are the exact same value. And so if there's no reference to bandwidth, they mean nothing. And this is so when somebody starts talking to you about thermal noise floor and gives you a line of crap, what I'm trying to do is equip you with a way so you can figure out if they know what they're talking about. If somebody uses the term noise floor, okay, and you'll hear that, right? We talked about the theoretical noise floor, right? Or sometimes you'll hear the term noise floor without stating that's the thermal noise floor or the theoretical noise floor. That can be used across both ways, and unfortunately it should be defined. But if somebody says my noise floor is X without knowing that you're talking about the theoretical noise floor or something measured, you may have a problem. So it's sometimes used to describe KTB, but often is used to describe the measured noise floor at a radio site. The term noise floor must also reference bandwidth to be of any relevance, but what I'm getting at is that just the term noise floor is kind of ambiguous. Example, if someone referencing a public safety land mobile system like us comes out and says, boy, my noise floor is off the chart, it's at about minus 105 dBm, which means that, and again, I don't want to go into the math, but that's bad, that's not good. And he or she makes that statement to an LTE engineer who's a cellular engineer, he or she's going to get a strange blank stare. Like, what? Your noise floor at minus 105 is bad? Well, for them, they live in a world, right? Again, here's our chart. They live in a world of 10 megahertz channels or even 20 megahertz channels where the noise floor, the theoretical noise floor, is only at minus 104. If you come in and you say, my noise floor is bad, and you're at minus 105, and you don't reference it, they look at you like you're insane because their frame of mind is, oh, God, I got this huge broad channel. I would love to have a noise floor of minus 105 because the thermal noise floor is minus 101 in a 20 megahertz channel. Therefore, it's impossible to have a measured noise power of minus 105. And even if it was possible, the LTE engineer, he or she's loving life if they have that noise floor. So all I'm saying is that noise floor is from a perspective of bandwidth. And I even have this trouble with the public safety guys because sometimes I don't know what bandwidth that they're measuring. Another huge problem in the industry is lack of knowledge when it comes to using test equipment. A lot of this has to do with equipment manufacturers using default settings that take over, and they did those to a piece of cellular carriers. And so a lot of times the equipment kind of defaults the settings that would be used to measure a cellular channel. We don't need to measure a 1 megahertz wide channel. We need to make a 12 kilohertz wide channel. And again, I'm not going to go into the math, but if they measure it with the wrong setting on the test equipment, it's irrelevant. We talk a little bit about noise figure. Somebody brought that up today, and I just even said most of these amps don't meet the noise figure requirements of the FCC rule section 9219, which gives us a 9 dB noise figure. And again, dB is reference, right? So we're referencing, we're saying that you can have a noise figure that is referenced to something else. So it's pretty simple when we talk about noise figure. Hold on, I apologize for hitting, what did I do here? Okay, so we have a channel. We talked about the channel bandwidth. We have the noise floor, KTB, and we have noise figure, right? Anytime an electron moves through a component, an amplifier, it adds its own noise. So not only do we have the noise floor, the theoretical noise floor to contend with, we have the noise figure of an amplifier. We have to contend with that. And we also have man-made noise, like from LED lights, from all these things that are supposed to be controlled by the FCC that aren't. So at a site, you might actually have somebody with a measured noise figure or noise floor that's higher than the theoretical. And in fact, I would just say 99% of the time you do. You're always going to have a measured noise floor. Your noise floor at a particular site is going to be higher than the theoretical, unless you live out in the middle of the country, which you could theoretically get down to the theoretical noise floor, especially in 800 megs. That's possible. But so these are the three things we have to deal with. We have the man-made noise, which we amplify along with the signal, and we have the noise figure, which is additional noise, and then of course we have any man-made noise that might be there caused by other things. So how does all of this relate to the licensee, and why do they need to give permission to use these devices? So this doesn't happen. And I'm going to try to give you guys a quick rundown on noise figure, and I'm going to try to do it in the audio environment. My studio, I have a mixer. My microphone goes into the mixer. I use it to bring in other things. I am going to effectively move the microphone away from my mouth, and I'm going to try to bring my voice back up by using gain, and you're going to see what happens here. I'm going to increase the gain of the overall system while reducing the input signal that my mouth is putting into the microphone, which resembles too few antennas on the inside, by the way, folks. So here, and there's no way around this. There's no free lunch. This has to happen. So as I turn my mic down and I try to raise the gain to get it to come back, you'll notice what happens here. So hold on. Okay. All right. Now I have everything set back up the way that I had it set before as far as output power. My output power onto the network that you're hearing, just like an in-building system, is the same. We're running right about the same. I have my voice in here, although what I did was I turned up the gain and turned down the mic. And then as I move farther away from the antenna, which I'm going to do, I'm going to move the microphone away from my mouth. You can watch me do that. Okay. Now I got the microphone way away from my mouth. And this is all this here. And I'll bring the mic back over here. But you can hear all the noise. Now, I am going to stop transmitting. So we're going to function just like a two-way radio. I'm going to stop transmitting. I'm going to kill my microphone. Okay, and when I was just talking then, I had killed everything, and all you hear is the noise. Well, now imagine if I put this in, and this is a BDA, and this thing is doing this all day long. So nobody's transmitting, and I have this noise. This is an exact demonstration of what radio sites have to deal with when the systems aren't installed properly. Okay, let me get back here and get everything adjusted properly. All right, so I brought my mic gain back up a little bit, and so now my mic's right, and my system gain, I turned it down, and the noise is gone. Okay, so, well, it's not gone. It is there. You can probably hear it if I go. You might be able to hear a little background noise there, but anyway, so, but it's all in reference to the same power levels, too. I wanted to make sure I was using the same power levels. So that's exactly what happens. And what then happens is that the radio sites have to hear that noise 24 hours a day. And if you have multiple BDAs doing the same thing, like if there were multiple of us, 5 of us sitting at a table, all doing that, pretty soon the noise is so loud that you can no longer hear the voices anymore. That's what happens with BDAs that are installed running 95 dBA gain. That's what happens with BDAs that are put too close to sites. And not without knowing the math, you don't know. And unfortunately, this is something that is the licensee's responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen. Okay, so next slide, we're going to talk about the other effect that happens. And we got a little video here. Hi, Greg Glenn here, CTO at Pulse Signal Solution and the DAS Doctor. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about uplink noise and how it can affect public safety radio communication systems. We have a bit of a clip that will show you exactly what can happen if the gain values are not set properly.
We're now in the communications room, or the comm room. This is a police radio, the single most important piece of equipment in the comm room. As you can see, some of the boys like to put their banana stickers all over it. There's Chiquita, there's Del Monte, there's a Bonanco, Gorilla's Choice. Now, everyone follow me to my chair, where I just need to get off my feet for a few minutes. Oh, I won't be getting up soon.
Testing.
Testing.
You really did it this time, Bart! You're in for the punishment of a lifetime!
When do you expect the ringing will stop?
In about 10 to 15 seconds.
I certainly hope so! That's better. Now, about your punishment, young man.
I know. I'll go to my room and think about what I did.
Well, I hope you found that clip. Okay, so I hope you guys found that a little bit fun. So let's wrap this up. I've got a few more slides here. I'm going to move quickly through them. I'm assuming everybody can hear me still. I had a little bit of a pop-up on my screen there that stopped the video, I think. Are we still okay, Rob? Or Nate or whoever?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All good.
All right. So here we go. All right. So we have, many of you have seen this ecosystem bubble, right? Where we've got the knowledgeable integrator, the approved public safety specific equipment, correct design methodology, all that stuff. All that stuff is important and it's great. We got diverse interest, common goal, but it's missing something. It's not correct. And that is that none of this moves until the public safety guy, the licensee, says it moves. So when we start seeing these designs, and I see this all the time, I just had one, in fact, Nate and I were discussing it, for Sacramento County, that came out in a Sacramento County owned building that had a DAS design in the general contractor's design. Nate's going, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for Nate, but when I talked to him, he said, well, that ain't happening. So all of these things are being put into designs. They don't belong there. The licensee isn't approving them. And, you know, unfortunately, what's going to end up happening is the FCC will get involved and start fining people if this doesn't quit. Okay, so why do you say this, Mr. DAS Doctor? The licensee must approve what Part 90 components will be used for any remediation on their radio system. I don't care what it is. The licensee is responsible for any Part 90 device. It has to be approved by the licensee. The only solution that does not require a licensee approval would be an inactive coax and antennas. So you can put antennas and you can put a donor antenna on the roof, but the minute you turn on electronics, it involves the licensee. A signal booster must have the express written authorization of the licensee, and there are reasons for this. Signal boosters are the only component on the macro network that are on all the time, and the way that they are currently implemented, they are a megaphone with the talk button pressed all of the time. They are waiting for that little signal to pop up and be amplified. Why do you, another thing, 6 dB noise rise, and I'm not going to go into the math here, but if you have a coverage area of 10 miles, you raise the noise 6 dB with the BDA, you effectively reduce the coverage area to 78 miles or 25% of the site. Signal booster running 100 dB of gain, 9 dB noise figure, and 10 dB gain antenna, which is not legal, but it is out there. It doesn't meet 9219 rules, but there are certified boosters that do this. Will affect an 800 meg system 7 miles away and a 400 meg system 14 miles, up to 14 miles. Signal booster interaction, full power interaction. And when I talk about full power interaction, that means that I can have a BDA talking to another BDA and driving that second BDA or third BDA to full power output. 4 miles with 107 dB. 2 miles with 101 dB of gain, 95 dB gain, 1 mile, 89, half a mile, 75, 1/4 mile. Okay. Cardinal rules. We've been since 2007 and everybody's breaking them. Well, before that, I mean, 2007 was when we started talking about it. Do not pack signal boosters within a 1/4 mile of each other. Don't do it. It's too far on the edge. If you're if you're less than half a mile away from another signal booster, you need to cross-engineer them. You need to know about both of them, and they have to be engineered as a system. Do not run more than 80 dB system gain in the uplink direction. Some HJs are capping at 65. I believe Sacramento is now doing that. Santa Clara, a few others. I think it's great. Press on, folks. Do the right thing. Physics prevents the signal boosters as outlined in the National Fire Code. Okay, period. You can't do it. The concept that a building not having coverage is a building problem is folly. In-building coverage is an infrastructure problem, and to look at it any other way will destroy or end up destroying the radio system's coverage over time. There's no free lunch. Adding a signal booster will change the dynamic of the overall macro network, period. You can't put one in without changing the network. Okay, whether it's just a small change where a licensee can't move one of their sites or add a voting site to a larger change, it is going to change the site, and the licensee needs to understand what that change looks like. It's adding a bidirectional simulcast transmitter to the radio network. It must be engineered as such. FCC requires licensee written approval for our signal boosters. Licensees must understand that as of today, it is their responsibility to make sure 90.219 is followed. I know the licensees on here hate me saying this, but it's your problem. The FCC rules, as written, unfortunately do not, right now, you can be certified, you can have your signal booster certified and not meet 99.219 guidelines out of the box. And we're going to talk about that in another session. This doesn't mean that signal boosters cannot be used to fill coverage holes. It just means that the licensees must have to have a plan before they put one on. In other words, if you have one on your system right now, you're too late. But you need to come figure it out, okay? You need to have a master plan, period. If you're going to allow signal boosters, you got to have a master plan. It has to show you where your signal boosters are, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. It does mean that physics does not allow the mentality of no coverage equals signal booster. I mean, that is crazy. I don't know if it was a bunch of high school teachers reading a document and writing. I mean, it's almost like telling the 747 pilots how to fly their planes, and you're the authority because you read it in a book. There's been a lot of testing done. We know the numbers. We knew the numbers back in the late 80s, early 90s, and somehow they have been ignored. Another illustration from from the archives of Fix My Problem, Please. I hear comments that say, oh, this stuff only happens in urban areas. I submit not. Most signal booster interference I've seen lately goes just like this. How to take down your radio site in 5 easy steps. You take a piece of land. You put a road in it. You then build a new big box store and you throw a BDA in here. This is step 2 right here, right? Which is the first mistake. There's no RF plan for the development. And the excuse was the fire code said the building owner has to install a signal booster, which that got done there. Not really a problem. Oh, 6 months later, we build a new big box store. And we put in another signal booster. Again, second mistake. No RF plan. Never went through the licensee. Reasoning? Fire code says the building owner had to install a signal booster. Oh, now we install the third big box store. And third mistake. Still no RF plan for the development. Reasoning, the fire code says the building owner had to install a signal booster. Oh, crap. Okay, and I'm just letting you know that nobody ever tests for cross-interaction of signal boosters. It's not in the code. Most people don't even, I guess, just figure it doesn't exist or something.
128, sorry, you had static tonight?
Another. Mary 4.36.
Sorry.
Okay, I stopped that there because I did spend a little time dispatching in my life, and way back when, back in the day before, when Eagle Scouts could do this like 30, 40 years ago. What was sent in that message was send others. So I just want you guys to know, and I don't know if the dispatcher caught that, but what that officer was asking for was send others, and I'm going to tell you about the incident that caused this in a minute. Here we go.
Mary 4.36.
Let me go back. I apologize.
128, sorry, you had static tonight?
Another.
Sorry, you're still sketchy.
10-4. Can you get the Franklin gate, please?
Adam 6110, was there another unit?
Okay, so I'm suspecting what they're doing is they're switching to some other channels because they got interference. That's number one. I got another sketch, same location, same problem.
Mary 4.36. 4.3. We can hear you, but the radio keeps static.
Sorry, guys, we're having interference on our channel.
Okay, so these are actual problems from agencies that I've had to deal with different signal booster issues. Okay, a couple of quick things. All right, first one, we have Big Box Store A and Big Box Store B. They're 873 feet apart from each other. So first rule broken was they stack BDAs. Number two, we added another building in between. That building is 419 foot from building B and 597 foot from building C. And again, cardinal rule, do not BDA stack, right? Because even at lowest gain levels, this is very, very edgy. Okay, so now let's take a quick gander at what this has turned into. By the way, just so you know, this particular agency no longer puts signal boosters, doesn't even do enhancement in buildings. And that is all due to what? The fire code. And I'm not trying to knock the fire code, but if people aren't going to start listening to the experts, then this is the things that are going to happen. Essentially, what we have here is, and again, this is one alternative. I mean, for this particular agency, I might have recommended that they stand a base station out here because this is growing, an area that's growing huge. Or, BDA with fiber feed, that would be one option, or base station, low power base station, simulcast with a fiber distribution. There's more to the south of this going on. So anyway, so let me talk about how this manifests. If you're very lucky, it takes down your radio system and it's found immediately by the licensee and the problem is shut down. That's if you're lucky, right? You turn it on, the licensee sees it right away or the engineer sees it. Unfortunately, a lot of times I've had 2 or 3 situations in Southern California where I've seen the problem and I told the fire department, you can't really turn this on, and they've turned it on anyway. So, and they weren't even a licensee. So I'm not even going to go down that road. But you gotta have qualified people putting this in. And the lucky, like I said, if you're really lucky, it takes it down. You will find it immediately. It causes about 10 minutes of grief in your life and you're cool. If you're not so lucky, what it does is it takes out a portion of your coverage area. Maybe this big parking lot out where all these are located, and then you have a demonstration or you have some other kind of emergency where you got to roll a lot of officers in and they can't use their radios in that location. That's if you're not so lucky. And then if you're about normal, you're not lucky at all, right? It just chews away at your LMR infrastructure, and you find it about 3 years later, after you're going and you're going to expand your system because you have lost radio coverage. So those are what happens. I am at my end of my presentation. I hope I didn't bore too many people. I know I went a little bit over where I wanted to go, but I'm going to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Greg. So let's go ahead and start with Mr. McPherson. Looks like in the chat asked a question. It might be something you want to include in the slides with your next presentation, but when you were talking about the temperature piece, he was wondering if you can reference that in an 800 meg system.
The temperature piece?
Yeah, you had a slide.
Give me the question.
That is the question. He's just asking, can you reference this temperature piece in 800 megs?
Well, when we talk about the thermal noise floor, okay, KTB, that is all, I mean, for what we do, it doesn't change in 800 meg. It does, well, first of all, it has to do with channel bandwidth, right? And if you've got old channels, you still may have some 25 kilohertz channels. So the noise floor there is a little bit higher than 12.5 kc. But at 12.5 kc at room temperature, the thermal noise floor is minus 134 dBm. Does that answer the question?
We'll wait to see what Mr. McPherson. Oh, yep, it looks like it did.
Okay.
Michael Procia is asking, he says he's familiar with FCC Part 9219, but he would like to see the letter of specific guidance from the FCC. I know it's something that you had mailed out in the past, correct?
The specific guidance from the FCC. I mean, as far as what? Yeah, I mean, we can get them the letter. I can mail it out. I see that there's something about 9219. Basically, the guidance doesn't talk about the technical rules. It just talks about the. I mean, it just states that the technical rules in 90.219 must be adhered to. Is that what? And yes, the FCC rule section 9219 specifies 10 kilohertz bandwidth for noise measurements. That's correct. I see. I'm seeing this in chat. I don't know if these are questions or whatever.
So one of the questions, and I think this one would be a perfect one for Nathan, as long as Nate, you're still on here. The question is, would it be the jurisdiction's responsibility to determine that other BDAs are too close? And if so, what is the solution?
So from the standpoint of the licensee, and since the FCC deems us currently responsible for any device that retransmits our frequencies, yes, at this time, that puts a huge burden on us with manpower and staffing, along with just the burden of trying to locate these BDAs that they're close to each other. Now, in an ideal world, which we currently don't have, all BDAs would be accounted for. We would have them on, let's say, a Google Earth map, and we would say, okay, I've got 3 BDAs in a close vicinity here. You can't add another BDA over here, any closer than a quarter mile or, half mile or a mile. But yeah, the way the current regulations are written, it is the licensee's responsibility to take care of the problem. And I don't think that's a reasonable summation of the problem. I think we have to be involved in it. But the FCC needs to rewrite that legal legislation.
Thanks, Nate. Let's see here. Another question is, will FirstNet and other cellular-based ER communication systems, so ERRCS, solve the problem with noise oscillation and all other BDAs related problems, or will we still need signal enhancement after we transition to a 4G or 5G technology? Greg, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. I mean, the 4G technologies, no. I mean, you're going to have more problems in building with anything that's broadband than you do. I mean, that's where, the cellular carriers have spent billions of dollars putting in building systems. So do we need to have in building enhancement? Yes, but the carriers dropped using signal boosters a long time ago. And I mean, now you got these Part 20 devices that basically don't work, but they're out there. But they quit using, for the most part, signal boosters a long time ago for this exact reason. And again, I'm not saying signal boosters can't be used. I'm saying that signal boosters have to be designed as part of the system, and to theoretically just throw one in a building is folly. You're going to end up killing radio systems. So in essence, no, it doesn't solve the in-building problem, where you're going to see different in-building applications. And I don't know who asked the question, but what was something about oscillation? One of the things that's in the fire code is oscillation detection. Again, guys, I'll be real honest with you. I've seen two that have been on the air that have oscillated in the last 10 years. Oscillation is not a problem. It's improper design. It's too high a gain. And I shouldn't say. I've seen two that were on the air. One of them, antenna change caused it. Somebody came in and moved the antenna. And I have worked with a couple, especially down in Southern California, where in the T-band, where we've had channel spacing so tight on uplink and downlink that, because we were starting to try to defy physics. But this whole thing about, we're going to put oscillation detection in BDAs, it isn't going to cure anything. The problem is not oscillation. It may be interaction, but it's not oscillation as people think about it.
Thanks, Greg. Nate, I do have another one for you. Tony asks, do you have the SRCS BDA management form readily available online? And should these forms be submitted prior to a new building being built, or do you prefer the vendor wait until the core and shell is built to have a benchmark test done?
So in answer to your question, we do have a BDA management form available to any vendor that contacts us. Unfortunately, our county is still operating on regulations that were passed in 2001, and that does not involve the licensee, meaning SRRCS, being involved in a BDA being installed in our county. So it's been very difficult pushing these forms out to our fire marshals. We're not even sure that the fire marshals are enforcing that. It's only been in the last year or so that we've pushed these forms out, and we've asked that they be done, before the installation of the BDA. They'll let us know how they're designing the system, and then we have to receive that form in a completed format at the end of the installation, which gives us all the levels, where the BDA is installed, in what room, and what building. It gives us all the information that we need to have to track that for future reference. So when a BDA goes on the air under full commissioned use, then we can track that down if there's a problem. If it ever goes spurious, or if we have some interaction, those kind of things would be very helpful. But as it is currently, we distribute the forms as best we can to the vendors and through the fire marshals. But right now, we're in a state of the Wild West, is the best way to put it. And the regulations need to be firmed up and put in favor of the licensee, meaning SRCS, to protect our first responders. But that's where we're at right now.
Thanks for that explanation, Nate. Looks like we have one more. I'm going to shoot it over to you, Greg. So Brian, as a follow-up, is asking, is there a quick reference guide to use when dealing with vendors and doing field performance inspections that covers thermal noise, making sure the systems are timed correctly, etc.?
I guess in short, no. There's not. I mean, this is, and I don't. This is something that this is something, and we. It's just something that it should be engineered into the system. I talk to Nate constantly about, I'm going to say that. Well, and I don't want to get shot here, but I'm going to say that 80% of the systems that go in aren't engineered properly right now, today. 7 years ago, I wouldn't have said that. Put it this way. I deal right now, I am getting a call about or dealing with an interference issue with somebody on a phone probably 3 times a week. 7 years ago, it was probably about once every 6 months. And it's just, I don't know. I guess everybody uses IB Wave, and I'm not knocking IB Wave, but none of these people are doing any uplink analysis. Everything's based on, oh yeah, I got good downlink signal. And the bottom line is, your downlink signal's easy. Downlink signal's easy, and 99% of the time, if you got your uplink right, downlink's going to fall into place because you're really uplink limited on your dynamic range. I don't know if Nate wants to comment on this, but I am now seeing different HJs cap the amount of signal that they want to see at their sites. And Nate, you might want to pipe in on that, how you're dealing with it. But we've got several different ways it's being dealt with.
Sure, Greg. Yeah, no problem. We're seeing vendors installing BDAs in our area that have very little training at all. I think it's important that the industry set a standard or a grouping of standards, and I know NICET is trying to do that, or at least trying to get those standards in place. But the problem is that when I deal with a vendor, over half the time, the vendor knows less than the average FCC licensed technician, and that means that they've just passed the test. And so they pass their FCC GROL, and then they go into a week-long course with whatever vendor they have that's giving them training. And they say, okay,
No, that's
program
a
these
2-hour
radios in.
course. That's a
Yeah, it's a
2-hour
2-hour course. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of vendors that are installing BDAs here that know very, very little about how to properly align a BDA or have any concern about, are there BDAs in the local area near the one that we're putting in? I never get that question. They never ask me, are there any other BDAs in the area? And I say, well, yeah, you got a BDA 500 feet down the road from you. So the lack of training and the lack of enforcement, on the side of our fire marshals in the county has just been very frustrating. And, if the engineering isn't done to a certain standard by an experienced person that has spent time in the field for years, I mean, you can graduate from school, but unless you've dealt with it in the real world, you really don't know how to engineer a system properly, particularly with BDAs and RF. There's a lot of intricacies involved here. And anyway, we're seeing a lack of training, and the vendors just don't know what they're getting into. Now, that's pretty much my comment there.
And one of the things too that I wanted to bring up is, we now have AHJs that are basically capping the amount of signal that they want to see at a site. And it's so bad, basically what they're saying is, okay, fine, we're going to allow you to put in a maximum of neg 95 on my system, or maybe even a little bit less, because we don't want the BDA to cause our system to go into fail-soft. I mean, and I know Nate didn't share this, but that they have a 10-site simulcast system. So somebody throws in a BDA in downtown Sacramento up against, say, the jail site, or even Brighton Heights even, but the jail site, any of the main sites in that 10-channel simulcast, they take down the 4 control channels. That takes down the whole system, because you don't affect just the one site. Simulcast means they're all tied together. So you may have an interference problem in a 1/4 mile area of a site that's in the very corner of operation, but the network's going to say, hey, I got to take this all down, and it will take it down. And I know Santa Clara has had several situations where, the system has gone down because of this. So it's not fun.
Yeah, Greg, and we're pushing very hard for legislation and information on what types of BDAs are coming in. We do want to cap this at 65 dBm, based on all the conversations I've had with many people, including yourself. And until the long arm of the law writes the legislation, we're having trouble enforcing that. So we have capped our signal coming into the system at about neg 95 or less. And again, that's not necessarily up to the codes, but that's what our system needs to safely operate. And again, a cap on the gain of 65 dBm makes perfect sense. There's no reason that you need any more than that in a building. And you and I have had many discussions about the math involved here. And again, we really need to see that legislation put in place locally here. I'm fighting very hard to make sure that happens.
Okay. Well, no, I applaud you guys, because this is the problem. I sit on the national, NFPA, and right now, so now they are putting in language that, that the licensee has to approve all of this. So hopefully this will help. I do hope it helps, but they're also very involved in the micromanaging of, it has to have certain, and that's changing a little bit, but this really needs to become if you don't have in-building coverage, contact your licensee and work out a solution. That's really where the fire code needs to go with this. I don't know, with them. It's not the right panel to be making the decisions on what's happening with radio systems. And I'm not knocking fire guys. I don't want to get it wrong, but I sit on a panel with 52 people, and there's 2 RF engineers in the room. We want all these great things. We want utopia, but we want to ignore physics. And I think, that's where we've gotten in the last 5 years. This thing should be great in the annex. I had no issue when they put it in the annex of 72, and even if it carried over the annex of 1225, but I don't think that you can't. First of all, it is not a code official that can even legally make the call and say, you have to do this on this radio network. they can't make the call. The FCC has made that really clear, and in fact said so in Q&A. It's kind of like people don't understand. They say, oh, well, if the building code said no, I have permission. No, the FCC said no. If the licensee says no, if the licensee doesn't grant permission, then the answer is no. And if you continue to do it, it's a $100,000 fine. I'm just not sure who's going to get the $100,000 fine, if it's going to be fire code official, if it's going to be somebody who installs it. But I do believe, based on the record of the person in the FCC that's driving this, and I know him personally, he will run this to the end until it gets cleaned up. And no matter, hopefully we get it to a point where we get it cleaned up in the industry rather than having to make fools of a few people before it happens. But maybe that's what has to happen.
Awesome, guys. Well, it looks like that is it for our questions. So I'll pass it back to you, Greg, if you would like to close us out.
Okay, so let's see. I've got Q&A. Is somebody looking at the chat? Was there anything? I noticed that people were actually putting questions in the chat too. Did you get all those?
Yeah, I made sure all the questions were either addressed or asked to you guys. There are some comments in there that we can review afterwards, but
okay,
it was more so comments.
Okay, so anyway, I do thank everybody for stopping today. I guess we made it right at 2 hours, which is good. I will say that the next session, if you're interested, is going to dive into the math. So we're going to talk about the math behind this, and how this goes, why this is a problem. And then the third session will be, again, very focused on licensees and those. And again, there may be licensee reps that the licensee has actually said, okay, you need to do this and we will sign off. I would encourage those people to be in session 3 because we're going to talk about this. The bottom line is, if you don't have a wireless plan, and that's the problem with the whole BDA thing and being driven by the fire code, is that there are places that do have master plans, and their master plans get blown up when they go and they put a site in. There was a situation over in the Bay Area where one city joined a part of a bigger network, East Bay ERRCS, and they found 5 or 6 BDAs were causing interference. And the reason they joined ERRCS to begin with is because their coverage had been reduced. So it's very possible that, and it wasn't a bad thing to do that, but those are the issues we deal with on a daily basis. So thank you for everybody. Thanks to Nate and to Dustin and Rob, and I hope to see you guys all again.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, guys.